Hello, I'm John. Welcome back. So lately I've been doing quite a few single book review videos, but I have been reading other books in the background, and some of them I just didn't feel I was capable of really making a single video about each of them. So I thought that I would just do this check-in, wrap up, reading report, book report. I've yet to figure out what to call these kind of videos. Other people call them weekly book reports, but or weekly like Friday reads or weekly reads or something. But uh, I am not very good at putting out videos on a schedule, if you haven't noticed. So I really admire people who can do that, who can put out a video like every Friday, every Saturday, every Monday, whatever it may be. And I would love to be one of those people, but I find that doesn't really my reading kind of gets in the way of my video making, to be honest. And one of the hardest things I've had to do since I started this Booktube channel uh, is to have my videos keep up with my reading. My reading far outpaces my video making. And in the beginning, when I started my channel, I'm kind of going off on a ramble here, but you are here and I am here, and this is my channel, and I'll ramble if I want, right? In the beginning of my channel, I actually slowed my reading down quite a bit because I wanted to do that. I wanted to get a video out every week or every 2 weeks. And my reading just, trying to figure out what to say about all these books, I was just kind of racking my brain because I had never really tried to explain books to other people before. And even now I have trouble with it. I made a video the other day that I did 17 takes. And I mean, that wasn't the whole video, 17 takes, but it was 17 takes to finally get to the point where I could ease into the video. This is my second take. The first one was about 30 seconds long, so no real loss there. I have these false starts where I'll be like, hello, and then I'll start over. Hello, how are you? And start over, and until I just kind of have to, you kind of have to prime the pump like on a chainsaw or something, you know. But anyway, I kind of got off on a tangent there, and I'm not sure where I was. I've been reading some books, and I didn't know how to explain this first one in particular. I don't even know how I'm going to explain it now because it is Literature and Western Man by J.B. Priestley, which you may remember from my in between books video where this was one of the selections. I did start this and I did plan to read it as my in between book, and I just started it and I kept reading it and I read it pretty much all the way through, and I was really impressed by this and I really enjoyed this. Now J.B. Priestley he was a playwright. He wrote essays, he wrote mystery novels, he wrote dramatic novels. I'm not sure what his non-mystery novels were about, really. I know one was about stage actors. I cannot remember what that was called. I saw it. I didn't buy it because I didn't think I would be particularly interested in it, but I have one of his mysteries called Salt is Leaving, and I keep meaning to read that, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Priestley wrote a book in the 20s, and it was made into a movie. It was called like something, there's a house and some people get trapped there in the dark, in the rain, like a thunderstorm. You know, it's the 20s and the cars are not anything like they are now, so they're open and they're getting flooded and they get stuck in this house and there's somebody in the attic, and it was one of the worst movies I ever saw, to be completely honest with you. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent again. So what is Literature and Western Man about? It's about pretty much exactly what it says. It is a 500-year odyssey through Priestley's reading, really. I mean, Priestley may have been one of the most well-read people of the 20th century. And that's not an exaggeration. You really get the sense that Priestley read every single book he talks about. And some he just mentions for, in a line of a sentence, like one after another and he's comparing these books and comparing all these authors. And Priestley was born in a time before television, and he just gives you this feeling of having read every book you can imagine multiple times. I know in the beginning he says that he has a library at his home, which he's been dead for quite some time now. This book was written in the 60s, I believe. Uh, it's been about a month since I finished this. So his library at home had 50 to 60,000 volumes. That's what he says. Uh, and this is just tremendous. This has so much detail in it, so many authors, so many different books, plays, so many philosophers and their works for 500 years, up until 1938. I believe 38 or 39, right before the Second World War started in Europe. And it's just amazing, really. I don't even know. I've been dreading explaining this to an audience because I don't know how to explain it. It is like sitting with a very, very, very well-read, widely read friend and having them just say, all right, let's start in medieval times, and I'll bring you all the way up until 1939, and you just kind of sit there spellbound. Really, really good. Now, I didn't agree with every one of his opinions, with his thoughts, but that's okay because he was very polite, very, very eloquent, and I didn't even know who some of the authors he was talking about were. That speaks to his breadth and his uh, depth of reading. It was just really incredible, and of course it's old-fashioned. Priestley was born in the 19th century, I think. His book, Essays of 5 Decades, it's a collection of his essays, is one of my favorite books. And it's funny to me because in the 1920s he gave up having a car. And at the time I read that book, I was having a lot of trouble with my own car, and it was really funny and really nice to read something 100 years old where we were having these same problems of having to take our cars to the mechanic. And anyway, that's off topic here, but I'll just read some of the things in this book to you. So we start in the High Middle Ages and go through the Renaissance. Movable type, the Italian scene in Machiavelli, Rabelais and Montaigne, England and Shakespeare, Spain and Cervantes. Priestley really, really enjoyed Shakespeare. He was, as I said, a playwright, and so he goes very deep into other playwrights throughout these 5 centuries, which I have to admit to you kind of made my eyes glaze over a little bit because I am not familiar at all with that sort of thing. Really, I have read, like, the only real playwrights I have read through before the 1900s would be Shakespeare and Beaumarchais, right? So The Marriage of Figaro, and not very much of that. And then moves on. I know I'm just reading off the back here, but it has been about a month since I finished this, and there was just so much to it. So Rousseau, Goethe, Burns, Blake, Scott. Oh yes, poetry. Lots and lots of poetry in this book. Just fantastic. Just a fantastic odyssey through all this literature. Really well done. And I thought that I would read a couple of passages here. Just not even about literature so much. It just interested me because this is Priestley's writing style. So here we go. This is talking about the 1800s, the late 1800s, like the Victorian period. Before we return to the makers of literature, questioning and denouncing this society, we will give the age its immediate due. A member of its more comfortable classes, so long as he had not too much imagination nor too tender a social conscience, was probably better off at this time than at any other, before or since. He shared the age's self-confidence and superb energy, unmatched since the Renaissance. A middling man, a dull fellow compared with the brilliant creatures of the Renaissance, he was yet one of the lords of his world. He could make plans for his family, his business, his retirement, his travels and pleasures, without any doubt that they would mature. He never felt the earth was cracking, the sky falling. As he went to his office or factory, hunted and shot, dined out or enjoyed an opera or play, decided to try some foreign spa, he was not haunted by a feeling that at any moment some unimaginable catastrophe, some new revelation of the depths of cruelty in men, would threaten his world. He moved in a wider area of personal liberty than earlier men had known, or than we know now. He could manage his own affairs as he thought best, and could spend his own money, and he was only lightly taxed, and go on his travels without having to ask permission of the state. If he did get into trouble in his own country, he could without difficulty take refuge in another, for there was in his day no international conspiracy of bureaucracy against ordinary citizens. Compared with what men had been before his time, and what they are in ours, he was wonderfully free. And the confidence and energy born of this freedom, we must confess, had a marked effect on the age. Indeed, even its severest critics, the prophets crying in despair, though far removed from these average, sensual, unimaginative men, had their share of this confidence and energy. Even the cries of "Woe, woe!" seem to us now to have an enviably rich and confident tone. So that is one passage there, and that is, if I remember correctly, during this part of the book, he's talking about how literature and the people of the West, of Europe, became like the bourgeois, right? And so the artists had to basically suck up to the bourgeois in order to get funding, right? They were the ones they were writing the books for because they were the ones who read and who could afford the books. And so literature, this period for Priestley kind of takes on a kind of dull sensation for him. But there are some shining stars he talks about. But I thought I would read this other one, and it's him talking about the rise of the First World War and the effect that had on literature or the future of literature past 1918, because all of these great authors went off to war and were killed. So here we go. In the very middle of this age, the First World War rises like a wall of blood-red mountains. Its frenzied butchery, indefensible even on a military basis, killed at least 10 million Europeans, mostly young and free from obvious physical defects. After being dressed in uniform, fed and drilled, cheered and cried over before they were packed into their cattle trucks, these 10 million were then filled with hot lead, ripped apart by shell splinters, blown to bits, bayoneted in the belly, choked with poison gas, suffocated in mud, trampled to death or drowned, buried in collapsing dugouts, dropped out of burning aeroplanes, or allowed to die of diseases after rotting too long in trenches that they shared with syphilitic rats and typhus-infested lice. Death, having come into his empire, demanded the best and got it. This was no ordinary generation. It was the flower and fruit of an exceptionally long summer of European peace and prosperity, so much vintage blood. And the men among us who fought with it and saw it being destroyed, and the women still alive who cannot forget its wonderful bright promise, we believe to this day the best companions of our youth, the liveliest minds and bravest hearts, all the golden lads. And the English among us discovered how strangely prophetic were A.E. Housman's bitter laments in his Shropshire Lad, written so many years before, went to that war and never came back from it. This is something that nobody born after about 1904 can ever fully appreciate. Europe's total loss is beyond calculation. 1919 was a ragged shadow of 1913. What possibilities and potentialities in politics, arts, sciences vanished among the shell holes and barbed wire, we shall never know. But some consequences of this war we do know, and we cannot ignore them. The war cut Europe to the bone. Britain is of course included in Europe here, and so, with some reservations because of their distance from the scene, are the dominions of the British Commonwealth. Indeed, the Canadians and Australians fought some of the most desperate battles of the war. No intelligent and sensitive European, and writers can hardly succeed without intelligence and sensitivity could escape the terrible impact of these 4 years. They might be neutrals, but the war was there all around them. The total effect might be different for different sets of people. The neutrals, the non-combatants of the warring nations, the men who actually did the fighting, but it was not to be avoided. Any sensitive man, perhaps a writer hard at work, who temporarily succeeded in repressing any thought of the war, probably only let it loose in his unconscious. The younger writers of the embattled nations, who for one reason or another remained at home, but saw their brothers and friends fast disappearing, had the desperate choice of admitting the whole nightmare into full consciousness or risking what deliberate suppression of it would do to their unconscious. As for the actual combatants, if they came out of it in one living piece, they returned to the civilian world like strangers from another life. They knew too many dead men too early. They were closer to them than to the living. Besides, the living had changed. Everything had changed. How does a man, weary down to his bones and feeling half like a ghost, begin writing a masterpiece in some new mode? Setting aside the Americans, for both Faulkner and Hemingway, young as they were then, went to the war and were wounded in it. How many combatants survived the war to achieve major international reputations in the new post-war literature? For if something had happened to these men who came out of the armies, it is also true that something had happened, and was still happening, to the literary world in which such men found themselves. It was a world as unfamiliar to most of them as the civilian clothes they were wearing. So isn't that just fantastic? I mean, that was just super impressive to me. I mean, that book, those are examples of how this book goes from start to finish. And it was just engrossing. I really, really enjoyed this. And of course, like I said, Priestley is a bit old-fashioned, as you can tell by those readings, but very, very good, very interesting, even when you disagree with him. So that was Literature in Western Man by J.B. Priestley. So a couple of weeks after that, I had also read the autobiography of William Colby, the CIA director, and Kent State by James Michener. I also read this, The Scary Stories, Treasury, and she's frightening, but she's an old friend of mine. I absolutely love the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books. Very, very much so. Some of my earliest reading memories are of reading this book in the backseat of my mom's car. And there are probably stories in this that I could just about quote verbatim. Certainly that I could tell, you know, with all their elements. And this has Stephen Gammell's illustrations, which are just amazing. This one is about, what's this one? Cemetery Soup. This is about an old lady walking through the graveyard, and she finds a bone sticking out of the ground, and she takes it home and puts it in her soup, and a ghost comes looking for his bone, and she gets annoyed with him. This is a funny story. And she throws it out the window back at him, and he goes away. This is really interesting because not only is it scary stories for kids, and some of these illustrations are rather terrifying, to be honest with you, and I've heard that they have changed the illustrations, which is just, as far as I'm concerned, that's terrible. And I understand why they did it, but I think that books like this, scary books like this, you know, they give kids an ability to open the book. There's something scary. It's scary. You can close the book. The scary thing goes away. But you also become tempered to the fear. This is one Sunday morning. It's about a lady who goes to church one morning, and it turns out that she woke up early and went to church, and she accidentally intrudes upon a mass for the dead, where the dead are actually in attendance, and they are not happy that she is there. This is Something Was Wrong, and this is about a man who everybody is terrified of him. He's in the street and he doesn't know why, and he makes a phone call and finds out. But there are, in the back, there are all these great, it has a bibliography. That's what I'm trying to say. And so all these stories were adapted from stories in other books about urban legends, about rural legends and myths and that sort of thing. And Alvin Schwartz talks about how he came to write these stories, how what influenced these stories, where he got them, the background of them, what state they're from, who told them to him, or that sort of thing. And I think that's one reason I absolutely love uh, bibliographies. I've actually read several books from the bibliography in this book, including uh, Helen Creighton's Blue-Nosed Ghosts and Ruth Ann Music's The Telltale Lilac Bush. So here is The Ghost with Bloody Fingers. I very distinctly remember reading this story when I was a kid, and it was the first time I ever encountered the word guitar in a story. And I didn't ask for help. I read it myself. I figured it out. I was reading it aloud, and that was the first time I ever read guitar, and I read it properly. I was probably 6 or 7. Wait Till Martin Comes. That's one of my favorite ones. So a man is out and it starts raining and he goes into this abandoned house and he starts a fire. He wakes up and there's a cat there. No big deal. He falls asleep. He wakes up and there's a bigger cat there, much bigger cat. And it says, shall we do it now? And he says, no, let's wait till Martin comes. And he goes, well, I must be dreaming. He falls asleep. There's a giant cat. And he says, well, shall we do it now? And the big cat says, no, wait till Martin comes. And the man goes, ah! And he jumps out the window and he says, when Martin comes, you tell him I couldn't wait. There's Aaron Kelly. From Aaron Kelly's Bones. He dances himself to pieces. The Viper, who comes to wash and wipe your windows. So there are scary stories and there are funny stories, and this is one of my favorite books ever. And I was going to make a comfort reads video about this, and I still might, but I don't know if my enthusiasm for this book is coming through. I think so, but I love this book like I love few others. And the old covers for the 3 volumes are there. I actually prefer this one, and that's the one that I encountered first and that I had the longest. And so that is Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories Treasury with Stephen Gammell's illustrations. One of my favorite books on this entire planet, and I read it about every 2 years or every year or so. Let's see. Let me see if I can find the ones that actually frightened me when I was a kid. So one of them, I remember, I wasn't scared by all of them, but there was one that really did frighten me for some reason. I don't know why. It's The Wolf Girl. Supposedly because it's a true story, right? Supposedly there was a girl raised by wolves in Texas and I think, was it Arizona? This was about 100 and some odd years ago. I don't know. That just always freaked me out for some reason, the Wolf Girl. And let's see. I'm not sure. Oh, yes. Harold. Harold always freaked me out as a kid. These two, like, I guess cattle herders, they're up in the mountains and they get bored, so they make a doll in the form of a man they can't stand, Harold, and they sort of abuse it to get out their frustrations and their boredom, and Harold comes to life, and he grows bigger and bigger and bigger. But anyway, I can go on about this for quite some time. This is one of my favorite books ever. Okay. Okay, so I've determined that I just did the whole video, and I realized that if I put it out the way that it's filmed, it's going to be about 50 minutes long almost, 45 minutes long. So I've decided that I'm going to end this video right here, and I hope that's okay. I'm going to end this video right here, and so I'm going to split it in 2. And I don't know if it'll be 50 minutes long actually with the edits and everything, because I am going to have to edit some of it. But I will see you in the next video, and I do hope that you will join me in the next video. There's several more books to talk about, and I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.